Greetings, everyone. My name is Cici Beltran, and I am a graduate of the 2004 BSBA program, and I have the honor of serving as Olin Alumni Board's president. I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's Century Club Business Series featuring Dean Mark Taylor. As we know, the Century Club series is a tradition at Olin, longstanding tradition. However, this format is a little different, but we are happy to be able to gather and continue to talk about what is going on at Olin and hear from the Dean despite the unusual circumstances. Throughout today's presentation, please send your questions to the Dean using the Q&A function. We've allotted some time at the end of the presentation to address those. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dean Mark Taylor. Mark Taylor, the Donald Danforth Jr. Distinguished Professor of Finance, became Dean of Olin Business School in December of 2016. Prior to joining Washington University, he was Dean and Professor of Finance at Warwick Business School from 2010 to 2016. Please join me in welcoming Dean Mark Taylor.
Good morning. Thank you, Cici, and welcome to the first ever Zoom meeting for the WashU Century Club. And I hope that you are well, and thank you for your time and willingness to join us on Zoom. So before I begin my presentation, I want to take a moment to remember Chancellor Dr. William Danforth, who, as you know, passed on September the 16th, 2020. Chancellor Danforth was really credited with transforming WashU from a local college to an international powerhouse during the kind of 70s into the mid-90s. And during that period, enrollment at the university increased 11-fold. This is one measure of the impact he had. And his impact on the business school cannot be overstated. Dr. Danforth thought it was critical for a major university to have a top business school, ushering in the high standard of research and academic programming that has really become a hallmark of Olin since that time. And I will be forever grateful to Dr. Danforth for the kind welcome to Washington University that he gave me, and his generous counsel and friendship that he extended to me over the time I've been here over the past 4 years. And the foundation he built at the university and supported at Olin really paved the way for us to be able to respond to unforeseen situations such as a global pandemic. So let's just pay a moment of respect to Chancellor Danforth. Okay, so continuing, as Chancellor Danforth would have wanted us to do. Today, I'm going to reflect on how we, as a school, responded to the pandemic. What we've learned, how we're preparing for the future, both near term and long term. The strategic choices, I should say, we've taken over the past 3 years before the pandemic, our strategy and the implementation of that strategy over the past 3 to 4 years since 2016. Have actually put us in a good position to be able to weather this storm. And they include, for example, strengthening the financial management of the school, putting the school on a really solid financial footing, which allowed us to build up some important reserves over the past 3 years that we can, if necessary, draw on during this period of the pandemic. We restructured the Western Career Center, you'll recall, with a sort of root and branch analysis and rebuild of the Western Career Center that's really put us in a good position going forward to be able to help students during this time. And of course, making a strong investment at a time that now seems very prescient, but we've made a very, very strong investment in digital learning through the Center for Digital Education just about 18 months or so ago, which actually put us in a really good position when the pandemic struck. Now, when I discuss this, or as a school, we like to think about how we've handled the pandemic, how we're handling it, and how we will think about this going forward into the future in terms of 3 horizons, as you see there on the screen, right? So Horizon 1 is really what we think of as the spring into the early summer. That was when it's like a firefighting horizon, when we had to deal with this crisis that had been sprung on us, and in short order, right? We were short on data and short on time to make decisions. And our primary focus was the health and safety of our Olin and university communities, while making sure that we delivered on our mission to provide the very, very highest standards in teaching and learning in business education in the world. The second horizon really covers, I guess, the period from the early summer up until now, right, as we prepare for spring 2021. And we're, in a sense, raising our game, still in the midst very much of this global pandemic, but with a little bit of time to reflect, a little bit of time to prepare and think about how we're going to deliver really gold standard instruction to students in a range of formats this fall and into the future and into next spring. And then Horizon 3, which is kind of, I call it looking to the heavens. It's based on one of my favorite poems. I'm not going to recite the poem to you, but the essence of the poem is if you stare at a pane of glass, a window maybe, you can look at the pane of glass, you can look at your reflection in the glass, you can let your image reflect on that, or you can look through the glass and look up to the heavens. And that's what we need to do, is to look through this pandemic and now to anticipate what we have to do, right? What will the new normal be like? What will the world be like beyond this? And we are determined that we will, in a sense, bounce out of this pandemic as world leaders in teaching and research, and becoming really the business school of the future, thinking about what this post-pandemic world will look like. So let me reflect a little bit on Horizon 1, on this journey that we've undertaken together over the past several months. So, we had been thinking about the pandemic for a while, but the official communique came on March the 11th from the university on March 11th this year, when the university really made its first announcement that students would not be returning to campus, which triggered, of course, many financially challenging decisions for the university, including packaging and mailing all urgent items left behind in the dorms back out to students, reimbursing students for dorms and meals that they had not taken. Not to mention, of course, the immediate challenges for WashU's medical campus, right, with all elective surgeries cancelled and physician services focused only on COVID-19 cases at that time. Spring break was extended by a week, and we had that 1 week to prepare faculty to teach all classes and labs online. Students in the midst of their international experiences were called home early, and they weren't allowed to return to campus, right? Instead, they were instructed to return directly home from wherever they were abroad. So all but the most essential faculty and staff began to work from home, starting the week of, I think it was week of March 16th. And the spring executive MBA intake, one of our first decisions, was delayed until the fall of this year. Through this crisis, I think a key element of how the school has handled this, how the leadership of the school has handled this, is in kind of three basic messages: communication, and more communication, right? Communication really the key, right? That's an understatement as we move through Horizon 1. We were determined to survive the challenge and to excel, right? At that time, I suppose, thinking, like many of us were, that we'd be back to campus in a few months, or perhaps a couple of months. So what did we do? We continued regular weekly bulletins from me to all department heads, really just giving updates on what was coming from the centre, what was happening in the school. We built a COVID-19 website with important links to university communications and guidelines. And each week we had, we continue to have 2 community Zoom meetings, town halls, if you like. One for the entire Olin community, staff and faculty, especially on Wednesdays, and one on Fridays, focused really on for faculty and teaching and other faculty issues, where I would address the school at least twice a week. And on top of that, having a happy hour, as we'll talk about in a moment. And with most employees working from home, departments very quickly operationalized their work and continued their collaboration through tools like Zoom, Hive, Teams, Google Drive, Box, etc. Right? I'm sure these are all familiar to you now, right? And to make sure, I say that our Zoom time was filled with more than serious discussion, we continue to do things we normally do, and this is something we'll talk about throughout the presentations. We have never been deflected from our strategic intent, the strategic plan that we put into place, and the implementation of that plan has continued, whether it's on a high level in achieving our objectives, or just things like we have a regular annual Shakespeare Festival. And we continued this year with our annual Shakespeare Festival. We did it online on Zoom. The Bard meets Zoom, as it were, and we had an outstanding positive response from continuing with that. Yeah, apart from in addition to the twice weekly town halls, we also have the OOHQ, which is the Olin half-hour happy hour. I say that very quickly. And really, we have that really just to let off a bit of steam, to catch up as a community, replace our impromptu physical gatherings that we used to have in the Bear Pub, for example, by meeting online, perhaps interviewing some members of staff or faculty. We found a lot of interesting things about members of staff and faculty, and we met several erstwhile rock band members, for example. I've been interviewing people talking about in my career how I came here, and also having just a fun trivia quiz, and really just catching up a little bit in a more light-hearted community fashion. And I think that's also been very important. We've had good feedback. As the weeks went by, though, tough decisions had to be made. Tough decisions were made. Nearly 2,000 WashU family members, community members were furloughed, 15 from Olin. Merit increases were cancelled for this year. 403B contributions for the 2021 fiscal year were cancelled for all faculty and staff. And that was driven by projected deficits across the university, including of course the medical campus. At Olin, we also halted all planned facilities projects, things we're doing in the physical infrastructure, except of course for those that would help teaching and learning during this period, right? I'm thinking primarily of AV, audio-visual technology, updates and enhancements, which we of course have continued with, and in fact enhanced in many ways. As you can imagine, right, the students were also facing a disrupted job market, right? Many students, for example, had their internships cancelled they were planning to do over the summer. A few had their jobs rescinded. But as I mentioned, we were in a relatively good position in the terms of having what I'm confident to say is one of the best business school career centers in the world as a result of our root and branch analysis and restructure of the Western Career Center a couple of years ago. And the WCC was poised to move, immediately to move their services to virtual online delivery. And we ended the academic year with more than 8,000 appointments with students. That's double the amount since the restructure a couple of years ago, pre-restructure days. And the Olin team came together very quickly to support the creation of a virtual summer program with the Center for Experiential Learning. So a lot of students had their internships withdrawn over the summer, for obvious reasons. And we wanted to come up with a way to be able to provide students with a meaningful experience over the summer. Could it be a virtual internship, and some placements through the WCC for that? But for others, we in fact developed a system where teams of students worked on consultancy projects virtually online with companies over the summer to develop this meaningful business experience that would actually add to their education in an experiential way, experiential learning, but also importantly give them something to add to their CV and talk about as they enter the job market, right? So, and that summer program began on June the 1st, I believe. And the student teams then had 40 days to prepare final presentations and executive summaries of their findings for the project that they were doing for their clients. And that proved, when we put out a call, that proved to be, many of you I know helped us with this. We had nearly 300 organizations applying for the program to have students work with them. About 280 students participated, including about over 130 undergraduates, about 150 graduate students. Out of those 300 organizations, we selected just over 50, maybe 53 clients were selected. And 34 Olin faculty members stepped up to lead the faculty teams. And we got very, very strong feedback from the students and from the organizations that they did projects for. That was a successful set of projects carried out in very short order. And kudos to the WCC and the Center for Experiential Learning and the school and the faculty for stepping up in that way. So Horizon 2. So when we came up for air in June, Olin took it to the next level, raised our game, right? Horizon 2, accepting now the reality that that fall 2020, that spring 2021, we're going to look different. And we began to work on raising our game to meet that challenge, to see that challenge even as an opportunity, if you like. At that time, the Chancellor stood up a 150-member fall planning committee that included many of Olin's senior leadership and a web of integrated committees and subcommittees across the university. As part of that initiative, I co-chaired the campus redesign committee to ensure that we could bring students back to campus eventually with health and well-being in mind. And thankfully, our 2018 strategic focus had included a movement to online programming, right? And as I mentioned, a significant investment in the Center for Digital Education. So we were really ready. We had the technology, as it were. We had the great, really world-class staff in the area of digital education, online learning, to be able to move to this online environment and the hybrid environment involving some face-to-face and some online teaching. And on that, let's give a quick overview of our Centre for Digital Education. It's been so important, and it will be so important for us going into this new world. It's managed by Ray Irving and a really outstanding world-class team of experts in online learning, digital education. Its mission is to enhance the learning experience, extend Olin's reach locally, nationally, globally, and engage learners for life. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about this lifelong engagement and always Olin element of our mission and the CDE's mission a little bit later. It's housed in Bower Hall, right? It's just outside the Emerson Auditorium. And this is a photograph of what it looked like when we found where we're going to put this space. We went around opening various cupboards and cubby holes in the school. And we found this quite a large, well, fairly large space, which is really just used for storing old furniture just opposite the Edison Auditorium on the first floor of Bower Hall. So that's what it looked like before the update, and that's what it looks like after the update, right? It really has recording studios in there, and it's open plan area in the center for the video for the CDE staff. Really state-of-the-art equipment for video and audio production. And we have this world-class team of experts in online learning, production and platforms working in there. I think these next two slides really just are showcasing some examples of how the CDE, the Center for Digital Education, has executed its mission. So these are some examples of one of our professors of practice, Professor Rich Rifle, how he was able to bring a number of guest speakers from the finance industry online to interact directly with his students. I think the next slide shows our ability to extend the reach of the school, right, by bringing in content from our partner at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., which is also, remember, has been a strategic focus of the school to re-establish and reaffirm our relationship with Brookings in Washington, D.C. And as we see here, the third example is engaging learners for life, right? Which is part of the CDE's mission, part of the platform we're developing, and that is targeted at many of you, our alumni, right? And that is that's currently in beta testing, but we'll be rolling that out in the first half of next year, and then contacting you and seeing how that platform can be used really to engage with you in terms of networking and linking with the school, and providing learning opportunities with the school for our alumni throughout the world. The Western Careers Center, as I mentioned earlier, has been another area where we changed significantly how we work, right? How we work in order to make sure that we're serving our students and alumni through this crisis period, through this pandemic. So in the Western Career Center spent in June and July, for example, hosted six virtual career fairs, including an MBA summit, which involved 33 companies, 100 participants, 10 representatives from Google, for example. They hosted the first virtual Olin career fair in China, with 25 companies, and two of those were in collaboration with the university's career center. The WCC collaborated to onboard students through passport, career stamp, workshops for case interviews, and alumni panels, and many of you who participated, thank you. It hosted workshops with Consortium and the Forte Foundations to support building a community amongst our diverse student population. And they utilized utilizing tools like Microsoft Teams. The Career Center built community spaces for MBA students, for BSBA students, to be able to enable them to connect with their career coaches, for example, right? And with cohorts of 20 to 25 students together in those communities, and giving them a community to interact with during a time when obviously isolation, loneliness is a real challenge, right? During this time, and we've done the best we can using this this virtual community to combat that. Okay, so moving on, the university announced the first day of classes would be delayed, right? Moving on in our journey until September 14th. And in the midst of all this, we did some of the furloughs, well, most of the furloughs were lifted. For some, we have to, for some across the university, layoffs were made. Amongst those furloughs were converted into layoffs. But I think the figure is that 94% of furloughed university staff actually returned and came back after the furlough. And of course, with a world-renowned medical school as a partner, great WashU Medical School, guidelines for masks, for physical distancing, for hand washing were communicated, right? And classroom capacities were calculated, what the best density, the safe density would be for a safe return. And we began to head into the fall. And as we did that, we did things like we developed welcome kits, making sure which we handed out to all new students with lots of swag, PPE, sanitizing tools. There they are being as the stations they were handed out at, WashU Olin branded gifts and swag. And we continued to mail those out to students unable to return to campus, I should say, at this point. Classrooms were outfitted with screens, as you can see here, and you can see the density control there. Equipment was tested, updated as necessary. Faculty teaching spaces were demarcated at the front of the classroom. You see the yellow line, the dead line, do not cross this. And all that was really, again, this is our Horizon 2, to up our teaching game and at the same time, importantly, keep the Olin community safe and well. The buildings were blanketed with decals, signs, checklists to remind our community of the importance of health guidelines to keep everyone safe and healthy. So, first week of the fall semester started with 121 faculty members teaching 207 courses with 427 sections. And I think of those, around a third were fully online. And we had classes for under 25 participants in person, and the rest were hybrid mixtures of being online and some in-class participation. In week one, we introduced this new role of engagement moderators. So this is an important role which makes sure there's if a course is being in a hybrid fashion, say partly online and partly in class, we make sure we have somebody there that's making sure that connection is made, handling the technology, making sure that questions go through the chat room correctly, related to and relayed, sorry, to the faculty who are teaching. And so in week one, I think we had 62 engagement moderators sitting in the back of the classrooms, logging into the various Zoom links to make sure that students online felt connected, faculty felt supported. And initially it took us a little while, because these are student jobs, but it took us a little while to get students registered and get them to respond to their emails to register. And the staff were amazing in stepping up in that first week. I think in that first week, there were 62 engagement moderators, and over 40 of them were Olin staff. And that was one way, I think, in which the school came together, that staff actually said they really enjoyed the experience of actually being in the classroom and being able to see faculty in action as teachers that they'd never seen them before, and came away suitably impressed, I should say, in all cases. So really, and that's, thank you to the staff for stepping forward in our moment of need. And as we went on, of course, we enrolled more students as workers to work as moderators. So this fall we had a specialist master's program incoming class. I think we have about over 300, something like 170 online, about 140 in person attending those classes. Our full-time MBA class is around about 90 or so, which is about what it is normally now, with about 25 online, 65 here in person. Our professional MBA, PMBA incoming class has about 54, 55, of which about 8 are online, 46 or so are in person. And of course, we have our undergraduate population, which is always around about 700 students or so. Here is, I think this is a picture of our executive MBA first weekend. Our new intake has up 36 students here, and we have been, all hands to the wheel. We've helped the university in thinking about how it copes with the pandemic, and we have provided space in the night center, right? The night center, part of the night center, at least the residential part, has been earmarked by the university as a quarantine or potential quarantine housing for students, while some of the lower floors sealed off. We'll continue to teach our MBAs on, but in order to be able to continue teaching full-time MBA in the night, we wanted to reduce density. And of course, for our executive MBA, who are used to actually living in the night center during their time they're on campus, they experience the time they live and work together. We actually move them to the Ritz, right? So we move them down to the Ritz-Carlton after I personally and our senior staff and faculty went down and checked out the facilities and the safety, the well-being, the quality of the audio-visual facilities, which we were satisfied with. So the first week of classes ended with the first weekend for the executive EMBA program at the Ritz with 36 students and on our newly relaunched, rebooted EMBA program. And of those 36, 33 actually turned up in person. And with our new curriculum that focuses on being values-based, data-driven, and they weren't complaining about being put up in the Ritz, I can tell you. And I went down and spoke and opened the sessions, and we're very happy with that. But by and large, we've been trying to we've been making sure that we cope with our facilities and use our facilities on campus. So while the first week it looked different, it felt different, right? Students were taking online classes and studying on campus while distancing, physically distancing in Olin spaces, as you can see here, right? And even under a tent in mud field. Overall, the first week went well, right? We also we have adhered to our values: integrity, collaboration, diversity, leadership, excellence. But we wanted to get feedback on this, right? We are values-based, but we are data-driven, right? That is a hallmark of what it means to be Olin. So we gathered data. We surveyed our students, we surveyed our faculty regarding Olin's academic environment and how we'd coped with the pandemic in teaching and learning. We wanted to understand any improvements, what challenges there were, what we should be focused on in order to continuously improve, get this feedback loop going. And I'll show you some of those results over the next few slides. But overall, I should say that the survey was positive, right? Very strongly positive, as we can say here. But of course, we could always improve, and the idea of having the survey was to get feedback on how we can continuously improve. And that will always be the case, pandemic or not, at this school, right? And I should say, perhaps I should just pause here for a moment to say how I would personally like to say how impressed I was, right? I was going to say how, surprised. I was not surprised, because we have an outstanding staff here, and we have an outstanding world-class faculty. And the way that the school has risen to this challenge has made me very, very, very proud, right? And the planning, the amount of effort that was put in over the summer to make sure that the fall would be a success has been quite remarkable, right? And also, I'd like to say thank you to the Olin students, right? And again, I was not surprised, but there have been instances at other institutions where students have interacted in a way they should not have been, but our students have really stepped up to the mark and followed all the social distancing guidelines, both on campus and off campus, as far as we can tell. And we have been really, really impressed with the way they followed those public health guidelines, while at the same time actively participating in classes. So I've just flashed up some of the some of the feedback. We've also continued, and again, this is our, as I mentioned earlier, we've not been deflected from our strategic plans. We've carried on implementing our strategy. We've carried on our business. Our physical events have been okay. They can't be physical, but they can be online. So, for example, our annual welcome cookout obviously was cancelled, but its accompanying event, the Diversity Expo, went ahead. It went virtual with and that was a 90-minute event, which included, I think, 18 groups with Zoom spaces. Students could learn more about Olin's diversity, equity, and inclusion resources. We've had a number of online events like this one, for example, just to, we've not been deflected from having our Century Club meetings. The annual Leadership Perspectives speaker series has continued. In fact, it kicked off this year on September 29th with Chancellor Martin there, and Dr. Stephen Lawrence. He's a WashU infectious disease expert, and I'm moderating the discussion. They were discussing leadership during COVID-19. I should also say that I mentioned our weekly town halls, our twice weekly town halls, and Dr. Lawrence has addressed those town halls on 2 or 3 occasions to talk about the pandemic and really answer questions, specific questions, and allay any fears or help allay any fears that faculty and staff have. And that's been an important part of our communication as well. As we continue our Horizon, Horizon 2, I guess our journey into Horizon 2, raising our game. We're now beginning to turn our attention, of course, from the fall to think about preparing for the spring, for next spring 2021. And for students who are unable, for whatever reason, to join us on campus, and if they don't want to take classes fully online, we're in many cases offering deferrals for our graduate students. And we have opened up a first ever spring intake for all SMP programs, right? So students that weren't able to join us this semester in the fall will be able to start their programs if they wish in the spring. So, that really leads us to consider, what do we do about things like our global immersion, right? That we have our global MBA program, which I'll talk about in a moment, but a key part of it is having an international global experience. Obviously, we didn't have that this summer, but what are we going to do with that going forward? What about our other international experiences that our students typically have, as we are a global business school? We have around, at the moment, over 800 students, specialist master students, who are planning to join us, right? They're planning to start in the spring, to matriculate in the spring. How will they get here? And that will depend, I guess, on visa availability, whether the visa offices will be opened in their home country. Many of those are overseas students. Based upon the disrupted job market, virtual recruitment cycle, what strategy can we best employ to support our students' career journey going forward? These are things that we are thinking about as we go forward into the remainder of the academic year. But then beyond that, if you like, looking through that pane of glass, from focusing on the image, on the crack in the glass right now, to look through the glass and look at the heavens and think, what comes next? What will this new world look like? And again, I would stress that we are we did put ourselves in a position because of the strategic choices, the strategic implementation over the 3.5 years or so before the pandemic struck in terms of our things like the career center restructuring, financial position, and strong investment in digital education and online learning, right? That we can continue to be strategic, to be innovative as we move into a post-pandemic new normal world, if you like, right? Global MBA, just to celebrate again, just mention some successes. Of course, our global MBA, our global immersion MBA, was recognized by Poets and Quants, one of the top business school information centers, websites, organizations. It was recognized as Program of the Year, right? The best MBA program of the year. And indeed, even during the pandemic, the Poets and Quants had published a feature on the 10 biggest and most important business school innovations of the past decade. And we are there amongst the top 10, right? One of the top 10 biggest, most important business school innovations of the past 10 years. So we need to think about, what does it mean to be global in a post-pandemic world? Because the globe will still be here, right? We will still be global. What does it mean to be global when travel may be restricted? Or if travel is not restricted, people perhaps will think more about other means of communicating internationally in addition to traveling, perhaps reducing carbon footprints and so forth. So we're thinking about that. We have a couple of task forces actually thinking actively about blue skies thinking and best practice thinking about what that new world will look like. And we are poised, as I say, to be a world leader in that area. Even before COVID-19, as part of the strategic plans we've been developing over the past few years, we were planning to launch 3 new specialist master's programs, online programs, completely online programs next year, right? Focused primarily at the domestic professional market in the United States, in North America. And that would really put us firmly into that online space and complement or build up our portfolio of programs that we offer, right? And if you have a good portfolio, you diversify your revenue stream, your income stream, right? And concentrating on marketing that in North America was part of our strategy, and it will continue to be part of our strategy. And we're on course to launch all of those programs next year in the fall, in October 2021. And indeed, we are accelerating our expansion into other online programs, particularly in the area of online executive education. So again, rethink, what does executive education look like in this new world, in this new normal? And as I mentioned before, we haven't been deflected from any of our strategic priorities, our strategic ambitions during this period, right? For example, we are continuing to be triple accredited, right? Remember that most North American, or the top North American business schools, are accredited by the AACSB, the Association of Advanced Collegiate Schools of Business. But in the world, the top 1% to 2% are accredited by 3 international organizations: the Association of MBAs, which we actually achieved last year, and EQUIS, which is the European version. And they initially said, well, we can't come. We said, well, like we said with AACSB, who were due to come here in April, came here in April. They said, we can't come because of the COVID crisis. We said, well, we'll do it online. We're all ready. So we were the first business school in the world to have a visit from the AACSB of our team of deans come and evaluate our school, and actually commended us on our performance, gave us a 5-year accreditation, reaccreditation. And EQUIS, the European team, is actually, again, we said, we'll do it virtually, we'll do it online, right? So they're actually visiting us virtually in December. So by next year, we anticipate, we don't prejudge, we anticipate that we will be accredited by EQUIS. We will be the first top North American school to have triple accreditation and join a very elite club of around 1% of business schools worldwide that have that. We're also expanding employers' opportunities for our students and thinking about our rankings as well. But let me say a little bit about something I alluded to earlier in terms of lifelong learning and always Olin, right? Once Olin, always Olin. Once you're into the circle of confidence, you don't get out, right? You're here. You are all in that circle. You will never get out. And we have made a number of investments in order to make that engagement even stronger going forward. We have launched indeed what we call Always Olin, right? And this is a strategy backed up by a new website, linked to our new platform that's being developed by the CDE, specific to alumni engagement. So on this slide here, you can see 4 areas of focus: alumni engagement, lifelong learning, career resources, and alumni communications. We launched in the first area, we launched an alumni engagement task force that is working on elements of Always Olin that I'll show you in the next few slides. So here are one element is events, right? Here are events you can join throughout the year. One of them you are joining right as we speak, right? Communications and lifelong learning opportunities will be much more robust through our various platforms, right? Communicating both with you and with each other, and our magazine, which we know that many people want to receive in hard copy, will also be available, through that platform as well. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, our Western Career Centre, I should have mentioned our Western Career Centre offers services for our alumni, right? And that will be facilitated through our Always Olin platform as well, our lifelong learning platform. Okay, so I've got on quite a long time in Zoom time, right? Notice that Zoom time seems to be a little bit more compressed. I've tried to instill a set of etiquette in the school that we should try and finish a few minutes before the designated time, so you can have time to move to your next meeting. But let me just say that in going forward, the school is in as good a shape as we possibly can be or could be, right? Given what's happened. Nobody wanted this to happen, but our financial footing, our restructuring of the school, particularly the Career Centre, and their investment in digital and online learning at a strategic time before the crisis put us in a really good position. The Olin community is strong in spirit, I believe, and including all of you and our alumni. So thank you for your continued support of WashU. Thank you for your continued support of Olin, and please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm always available to talk to our friends and alumni of the school. So thank you. So Cece, back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dean Taylor. As we know, agile leadership is key, and we can tell that Olin is at the forefront, going through everything. And definitely our students, staff, everyone's going through a crash course in agility. So we wanted to open the floor for questions. If you haven't yet, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We have one question that has come in, so I'd like to share this one. There will likely be some silver linings from our COVID experience. Are there changes that have been made at Olin that are related to the pandemic preparedness specifically that you feel will likely continue even after there's a vaccine and things return to normal or the new normal?
Yeah, thank you. So we had made an investment in digital and online learning, right? Now, it's important to think about online learning is not as a substitute. I mean, we will launch a number of online programs next year, and yes, they will be completely online. But even in the classroom experience, we had anticipated more what we call flipped classrooms, where we would use online digital experience to transfer knowledge, for example, and then use face-to-face experience in order to enrich the use of that knowledge, right? That's a kind of modern way of teaching. Now, those developments, I think, in terms of how we think about education will be accelerated by this pandemic, right? Because people will be used to using Zoom who weren't. All our faculty have been expertly trained, right? So that process will speed up. And as I said, fortunately, or brilliant strategic planning, we were actually really well placed to be able to take care. We haven't got to scramble and try and catch up. We're actually now ahead of the game in doing that. I think also there are some elements of this. So, for example, some of the feedback we've had from students about attending online lectures or online classes, they like using a chat. Students like to chat to one another. And they found that, what is he saying? What is she saying? What do you think of this? Or putting up a questionnaire that the professor can, or the presenter can actually see and relate to, has actually enhanced the teaching and learning experience, right? Because you can't actually do that during a normal physical lecture. So in some ways, I think the accelerating the experience, and we discovered things that we didn't know, like the use of the chat room, for example, will be enhanced going forward. So, and as I said, we are absolutely determined, as we look through the glass, we look to the heavens, that we will come out of this. We will use this challenge in order to make sure that we are at the forefront of business education going forward.
The second question we got was very related to what you were just answering, and it's about how faculty keep students engaged during online courses. Are there any other examples that come to mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, having we talked about having student chat rooms and communities where students can engage with one another, right? So we have to think about, during the pandemic, often it's not only from the professor that you learn, but you learn from speaking to one another. In some way, that's been enhanced through the chat room, but also through the chat facility, I should say. But also, I think in terms of having rooms where students can meet virtually and talk to one another has been very, very important. We're also having, we're having meetings and surveys with the faculty and staff to get feedback as to what the best practices are, so we can actually, in real time, build those back in as well.
As we look to, the fall semester is going well, and, time does fly. Any thoughts on the spring semester and its format?
Well, we're planning to deliver at the moment the spring programs in the same way as we did in the fall right now, right? But we'll be prepared to pivot as necessary. I mean, and I should say that preparing in our Horizon 2 over the summer, one issue was that the staff and faculty had to prepare for numerous outcomes. There was a possibility that we could have been told that we were going completely online. There was a long shot possibility we could be completely on campus, or anywhere in between those. So often we have to prepare for a range of alternatives, knowing that only one of them. So it kind of increases the workload and the planning burden, by fivefold or so. And that's why what you see in terms of our success is really the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's the planning and effort that's gone into that. So we will be able to offer some of the more traditional in-person programming, we hope, right, including some of our residencies, but that will obviously depend on the progress of the pandemic. But we will be poised either continue as we are, or to pivot to being to relaxing some of the restrictions, and we hope it is the latter, of course.
Right. As we think about the MBA program and the kind of global component to that, how do you foresee that in the future? Maybe will some of the summer travel be rescheduled, or what can you share on that front? Yeah,
that's right. So two of the big strategic innovations we made, digital education is one, the global immersion MBA, MBA of the year, one of the 10 biggest innovations of the past decade, according to Poets and Quantum. We're very, very proud of that. And that will continue, right? We will not be deflected, right? And business continues to be global. We'll just have to think about how we do that. At the moment, we usually start with a global immersion roughly in August. And at the moment, we've put that back to the spring. We may, we'll have to make a decision fairly soon, put that back to the summer next year, right? And then we'll see how that goes, right? But we will have international travel as a key component. But we will also, as I said earlier, think intelligently about what it means to be global in this post-pandemic world, and can we use, for example, we're just talking yesterday about some of our students working with venture capitalists in Israel, right? We've sent some of our students to do that usually in the spring. Obviously, they're not going to go early in January to do that, but we're talking about ways we can do that online, right? So working with real projects in another country online. Now, that's not going and experiencing the sights and sounds and infrastructure of a country, of an organization firsthand is very, very important. But we have to think intelligently, how we'll be forced to do this in the short run, and secondly, what the world will look like and how people will use these technologies going forward. I mean, one way to think about this new world, this post-pandemic zoomed world, is that it's even more global, right? That you can just have a meeting at the drop of a hat, face to face, if you like, in this Zoom sense, anywhere in the world at any time of the night or day.
Definitely. Case in point, I actually am in Puerto Rico hosting the session with you. So definitely there are benefits, and you can stay connected despite difference. We probably have time for 2 more questions. So one, the before last question would be, how can we support you as the Olin community with any plans in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm always really grateful for the support of our great community. Well, engage with us, right? Share your expertise with our students, right? Whether it's in the classroom, virtual classroom, or otherwise, right? Consider hiring our students, right? If you're hiring, consider working with our Center for Experiential Learning. I mentioned the way we've had these projects and students going out and doing projects for organizations. We're always looking for opportunities there. And as we will launch our Always Olin, our lifelong learning opportunities, please participate and engage that way. So engagement, I think, is important. I think also extending the reach of the school as ambassadors, right? Do you know great people who should join our programs, who would benefit from an Olin education, either undergraduate or postgraduate? Please send them our way. Spread the word about what we're offering at Olin. Be ambassadors for the school. And if you're inclined, just make sure that we are able to attract the best and brightest students to our programs, regardless of their means, right? So again, scholarship support is always extremely appreciated as well.
Fantastic. Well, we're blessed that Olin has set up such a great infrastructure to provide such great engagement despite where we are and what we're going through. So kudos to you and the team on that front. And lastly, interest in the name of the author of the poet, or the poem that you mentioned. There's a question on who wrote the poem.
That's George Herbert, who is a 17th century poet and clergyman, near contemporary of William Shakespeare. I'll recite the poem. It's a very short poem. It just says, a man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or if he chooses, through it pass, and then the heavens espy.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dean Taylor, for your time this morning, for speaking to the community. We're here to support you, and we applaud all your great efforts and the team's efforts with everything going on. So thank you, everyone who tuned in today, and have a great rest of the day. And we hope to see you virtually or in person soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Cece. Goodbye. Thanks for all you're doing.
My pleasure.